Hello, Biter fans. This is Jesse Jackson. I know I'm a new voice on this podcast track. I normally host Set Lusting Bruce and Next Stop Everywhere, but I was at DragonCon on Labor Day weekend, and I attended and participated in a couple of Walking Dead fan panels. So I recorded them, and I wanted to share them here. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. I thought it went great. Excuse the sound a little bit, but because I recorded it live. But I think we had a good discussion. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed. And thank you, Rob, and thank you, Diane and Marnell, for letting me borrow their podcast feed. Enjoy the discussion.
Hi, I'm Morgan McFarland. I'm a horror role-playing game writer. Recently, I've been working on the game Chill. I'm actually currently in the middle of working on the Undead supplement for the Chill games. I also wrangle the tags for a couple of zombie fandoms on AO3, so if any of you are fan fiction readers or writers, there's a possibility I've wrangled tags for you at some point.
I am Jesse Jackson. I look different than I do on TV. I do a couple of podcasts. I do a Doctor Who podcast called Next Stop Everywhere, and then my kind of passion is I do a Bruce Springsteen podcast, which is mostly about Springsteen fandom, and I have different people visit, and it's called Set Lusting Bruce, which is a long story which we will not go into here, and I'm excited to join these great people to talk about The Walking Dead.
I'm John Keegan. I'm the lead host for the Critical Myths Show. It's a podcast about all kinds of genre TV, including, of course, the Walking Dead franchise. I also write all the reviews for The Walking Dead on VogNetwork.com, which is our hosting network.
And I am your moderator. My name is Emma Loggins, and I am the editor-in-chief at fanbolt.com. And that is a geek lifestyle site that focuses strongly on genre television and film, and also the convention space. I also work with Heroes and Villains FanFest and Walker Stalker Con, traveling with them and doing interviews with the cast members. So that's our background, and let's dive right into this. One of the things before we kind of start talking about season 8 and Fear the Walking Dead, I want to kind of start with like the current landscape of things, and specifically with Negan in this last season. John, I know we kind of briefly emailed a little bit about this. Do you think the brutality of Negan in the last season premiere affected viewership or fandom at all?
Well, I think the numbers unfortunately speak for themselves. Something happened this season that caused the viewership to go down, and I do remember the hue and cry over the brutality of Negan in the premiere being cited quite often, either critically or by the fans, as being really a breaking point for a lot of people, which is very unfortunate because I think once you got past that point, it really changed the game for the series. So, yeah, I do unfortunately feel like it did have a bit of a dampening effect on the show.
How about you guys? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Ladies first.
Definitely for me it was a huge factor. I honestly probably only watched about a third of the most recent season. I did what I like to call selective watching. I have a handful of characters that I still care about their stories and I want to find out what happens, but I personally don't want to sit through an episode of Daryl getting increasingly crusty in a prison cell or anything that's really going into the deep workings of the Negan compound. Like, for me, the violence was just way beyond the pale, and so that was a real turnoff for me for the show this season, and I've had a really hard time continuing with the show, honestly, as a result. Specifically, who the violence is so often directed at, like the extremely graphic, violent deaths of characters of color, of lesbians on the show, really for me has been some difficult subject matter for me to continue to watch.
So I am not a fan of horror. Walking Dead is one of the few horror things I watch, and when I'm asked why, I said because they just do it so well. And so I haven't been bothered by this season, though. You know, I realize as a short, fat, white, old guy, I have a different perspective than a lot of the audience, and I respect that. you buy the concept, you buy the bit, and I think that's my deal. Is we know what we're getting into with this show, and you do see characters and you see them die and you see them horribly ways, and I just think that's the ride I've signed up for, and I'm not judging anyone else feeling differently, but that's kind of my perception.
And we'd love to hear from you guys too, so if you have any thoughts on any of the questions we're posing, just raise your hand and we'll make it an interactive session. Do you think with last season's premiere, is there a line they can't cross? Is there a line that would bother fans and would be more significant even than the brutality we saw in that season premiere?
I think we already found the line. I think that the drop in ratings shows that for at least a notable percentage of your viewers that they've already found that line. Like, it's one thing to go into a show knowing that you're going to lose characters, you're going to lose main characters, that's fine. But you don't have to show the graphic bashing in of the head of a beloved character like that. I think that the viewership responded really viscerally to that. So I think for a lot of us that was the line.
I sometimes, and I'm definitely going to sound like an old guy now, but in a lot of ways I think it's a worse world that we treat TV shows like sporting events and the ratings are how we keep score. In the past, we wouldn't know that. Of course, I'm talking about when we had really simple TV where, on Bonanza, Joe fell in love, she died, and the next week, we didn't even mention her. So it's a better time now as far as content, but I don't know. I think there's a core group that's going to stick with the show, and I do think that some people who love the show, this may go too far to them, and I respect that.
So how many people in the audience read the source material and knew issue 100 before they watched that season premiere? Show of hands. Okay. So for me, the biggest problem for Negan, it actually goes back to both the source material and how it was adapted on the show, which is that level of violence was necessary to sell us on Negan and his strict adherence to his rules. And once that happened, throughout the season, you saw him slowly but surely kind of walk back from those rules. There were many times where he should have and could have gone after Rick and the others for the things that they did if he was really going to follow through with what he promised when they were all lined up in that premiere. And that's what I think bothers me more than anything, is that you can go to that line, you can even cross that line, but you've got to make sure that it sticks and that it has real meaningful consequences and it doesn't feel like it was unnecessary in the end. And I think that's where they kind of ran into the problem, is that it was in the source material, but even in the adaptation, Negan comes out strong and then he slowly gets walked back from that strong first impression, in my opinion anyway.
There's also a big difference between seeing something drawn in a black and white panel and hearing the sound effect of a bat crunching somebody's skull. And I think that's also, it's just a difference in the format there. For me, it was not as upsetting to see that kind of violence in a comic book because there's no sound effects in a comic book. But the crunching noise was just a little bit over the top for me. That was like, I'm going to walk away from this episode for a minute here. So I think there are things that work very well in the comic book that don't translate very well onto the screen.
Well, I do want to hop in to talk a little bit about Season 8, what we know about Season 8 from the trailer that premiered a couple of months ago. Basic things that we know. Doesn't look super good for Father Gabriel. He appears to have been captured by Negan and is locked in a room with zombies staying on the walls outside. And of course, we have one of the quotes in the trailer that's probably going to become one of Negan's most quotable lines. What do you guys think is in store for Gabriel in Season 8?
Oh, nothing good. It could just be a red herring again, but I think that there are certain characters that they get to a point where they are at their natural end. And they do switch things up on the show from the source material, so you never know when that time is going to come.
I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I have a hope is that I think it's interesting, Morgan, your concern about the violence. My concern from the show, and I've stuck with it now, is I can only go without hope so long. And I need for my heroes to win one every once in a while, and to see, I'm okay with the long game, but I do need to see the end of the game having a win. And I think if anything I was pushed on this season is, I'm like, okay, yeah, we get it, things are horrible. Can we come up with a plan now? Can we just give me a little bit of sunshine? I think Gabriel's had a good journey as a character, and so I do kind of feel sometimes that I would like to see someone with a redemption the way he's Hun, and stick around, that we don't lose someone that has such a strong journey of finding his faith again and finding his courage and being part of the community.
Yeah, I agree. I would like to see that sort of investment that we've had in Gabriel across the last few seasons now pay off a little bit more, rather than, oh, well, now finally he's a guy that we can really rely on, so let's get rid of him. Like, I'd like our investment to kind of stick around and see some payoff in this instance.
We also see some sort of time jump. Of course, at the end of the trailer, we see Rick in bed, and he's got a walking cane against the wall, and he's got gray hair and the full beard. Do we think that this is just a dream sequence, or flash forward, or do you think there's some sort of time jump? What do you guys think about that scene that everyone's been talking about?
I think it's like the big dinner table scene with Glenn and Maggie and the baby. I think it is nonsense, and it's thrown in there to throw us off.
Yeah, I've given up trying to figure out what's going to happen. I haven't read the comic, and so I am, kind of shocked and stuff. Sorry that my communicator is going off. I don't know. I'm not going in blind. I've watched the trailer, but I haven't spent a lot of time analyzing it as much. I'm kind of, okay, I'll kind of wait for that a little bit later.
I think that they have a habit now of showing us things in trailers that they know that those who have read the comics are anticipating something coming along, but I'll say this, if they rush through all-out war to the point where they get to what comes next in one season, I'm going to be very disappointed. I hope that that's just kind of giving us an idea that they might go there eventually, but I hope it's not like, we're going to do all-out war in 8 episodes, bye. The pacing has never been that fast.
But how many seasons can you devote to a conflict with the same group of people, though, and not have it get a little stale?
Realistically, one. But I would hope, again, it's not the mid-season finale that's, good, now we're done, now we're moving on to the next thing. You've built it up so slowly, you've got to give it the right amount of time.
And you do, I ask, at times, like, what's the end game? How do you end this series? How do you find, a place to end it in a, because The Sopranos have already done the fade to black. So, how do you find this? What is the right ending that you have on this?
Well, I also think, kind of going back to what you said about needing hope, we want it to have the natural journey that this conflict needs to have, but we also need to have hope for the viewers. Does our audience have any theories on that last scene? No theories? No theories at all? All right.
We will call on you sooner or later, okay?
I know, a good portion of
especially the guy that is doing a rocking job of cosplaying Ming from Comic Book Men. I mean, he is rocking that cosplay.
I worked really hard on it.
Thank you.
Well, speaking about the war, we know that is coming and that it's going to be a major part of this season. What other storylines do you guys hope to see kind of play out in the season, or what other kind of story arcs do you hope you see?
Can maybe Judith not be a baby anymore? Because that child has been a baby. Now I have 3 children. That is the longest infancy I have ever seen, ever. How long is this child going to be a baby?
She's like a toddler now?
Sort of. She's still pre-verbal.
But how long? What is the time period, though?
It's hard to know because Carl's fully gone through puberty. I mean, he's like a grown-ass man now, and he started off about Judas size.
Yeah.
I'd like to see some sort of forward movement with the idea of these children of the apocalypse, these kids for whom this is normal, because we've seen several children, both on here and on Fear the Walking Dead. You've encountered children or young people who have adapted to the world much more quickly than the adults do. And for me, a story I would like to really see brought to fruition is the idea of, like, for these guys, it's normal. Is the happy ending we're going to get on the show is we just have a generation of people for whom it's normal and they go about their business, or, are the adults going to sacrifice themselves and these are the kids who get to live in the new world where everything's more or less okay again?
So I'm a sentimental, so I'd love to see maybe a wedding, Rick and Michonne. I'd love to see Maggie have a baby and then ask, certain people to be godparents and have that little quiet moment in between the exciting to show that, yes, the world's gone to heck in a handbasket, but we still have to find moments where we try to be normal and we try to embrace what we have with life now. It can't just all be survival. And then I want a Bruce Springsteen song on this show.
Like Carl to get a haircut.
I would like to see Carol get a much better storyline than she did last season.
Amen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd also like to see Morgan get a better one. There's a lot of things that happened in the source material that still haven't happened for him that I want to see that progression.
Speaking about Carol, personally, I want to see Carol and Daryl happen because I feel like that's been a long time coming.
What would you call?
But what?
It's like a creepy mommy thing going there. Like,
I think the tension it's waiting. It's there. What relationships, specifically between characters, friendship or otherwise, would you like to see further explored?
Well, I'm totally on team Rick Michonne, just hands down. I loved what I call their honeymoon episode, that it was just about them going around doing their stuff, finding their food, fighting the zombies at the carnival ground. I love that. Like, I would watch an entire season of Rick and Michonne's honeymoon, just going around killing zombies, being badasses, and kind of more or less getting a little break from the drama. So, like, I'm a very happy person in that respect.
I would like Carol to get a better storyline, and I kind of like her with the King. I just like that he's, I get the Daryl thing, but I kind of like that, she calls out his BS, and you can't BS a BSer. I kind of like their kind of interaction, and it's kind of could be a fun little love triangle.
Plus, the man has a tiger. I mean, how hot is that?
He does have a tiger. And, I would love to see Carl have as close to normal storyline as you can get. I mean, the kid has had his share of troubles, and it would be interesting to see him, I'm not talking a whole episode of him eating a jar of peanut butter, though I did love the idea, like, I'm hungry, I haven't had peanut butter forever, and I'm going to eat this thing down. But I would like to see kind of the younger generation, as you're talking about, kind of see some interaction that is a little more normal in between all the fighting and everything we've got to do.
I would love to see Daryl hang out with Aaron and Jesus more.
Yes.
That bromance is wonderful.
Well, do you guys have any questions specifically Walking Dead related for our panelists? Before we dive into fear? Go ahead.
Do you want more garbage people or less garbage people?
Less garbage people.
I'm kind of fascinated by the actress who plays the leader. She has some kind of a little something, and
Then you should watch Happen Leonard. She's in that, and
Okay.
she's equally weird.
Okay.
Very
But she's,
weird.
I think, I think that's an interesting twist, because you would want everyone like, okay, everything's, it's, right, it's like the Game of Thrones, no one is trying to build this alliance, and they're this thing. So I think it's interesting. I think it was just enough garbage people, so if it could keep the same kind of just the right amount of garbage, that would be good.
They kind of serve their purpose, right? So now the question is going to be, what purpose do they serve going forward?
Deadness.
Well, I do want to come back to Walking Dead, but I do want to kind of jump into Fear here as well. Now the series, of course, has already been renewed for a 4th season, which actually happened before the 3rd season had even premiered. However, it's going to lose its showrunner, David Erickson, who's going to be leaving to focus on developing new projects for AMC. With everyone enjoying season 3 so much and really coming back to it after maybe not so much enjoying season 1 and 2, do you think that his exit puts season 4 in jeopardy?
So if I could step in, does everyone watch Fear the Walking Dead? Can you get a hand raise? Okay, because I don't, and
I freaking love it.
I'm really disappointed in myself because, the lead actress, Kim, I'm trying to think of her name, right? Yeah, Kim Dickens. I loved her as Saracen's mom on Friday Night Lights, and she was amazing in Treme. So when I saw she was going to be the lead, I'm like, all right. And the first season, I was like, I guess I don't need another zombie show. So I've kind of stopped watching it. So it's kind of interesting to hear you say that the 3rd season kind of picked up. So I may have to go back and check it out. So I was just curious.
It was Frank Delane that sold it for me. Nick, I think, is an amazing character, and this whole idea of, because he is a heroin addict and he just lives continually on the brink of death, and he has no low that is too low for him to go in order to get his fix. Like, the idea of how this actually transitions into a survival aspect, it's been really, really fascinating for me. So I hope that that's something that whoever takes over the show is going to keep using, because I think that that's something that's really set it apart from The Walking Dead, is kind of the idea of he didn't really have any good skills from before. What he had before was something that was not helpful, that is helpful now in the zombie scenario. So I think that it really depends on what they're bringing to the table and where they see the characters going. So I think it could kind of go either way.
John, do you watch it?
I do watch it, still. I have to say that personally, the 3rd season hasn't really been giving me much to work with. I felt like is there anyone who minds me mentioning what happened in the premiere of the 3rd season? Okay. There was the loss of a major character in the premiere of the 3rd season, and to
that
me,
made me mad.
We talked about the violence before and about losing characters, losing that character, despite the fact that he was one of my favorite characters on the show.
And so pointlessly.
That's my point.
And it's not like he had something else lined up and he had to go.
But it felt almost rote. It just happened. And while, yes, I understand that these things happen randomly within the universe and so forth, it just felt like there was a lack of energy to it. And in the 3rd season in particular. So actually what I feel like is they've got a stable of good characters. What they need is maybe new blood to come in and revitalize the story. Because I feel like the pacing is very slow and I don't have a sense of where it's going. So maybe having someone come in and shake things up might be a good thing, as long as they don't just decide to sweep the cast out. Because as you said, there are some characters that have a lot of potential. I just don't feel like it's being realized the way that it could be.
Yeah, they really need to do more with Strand. Like, you've set up this really interesting, dynamic character, and they're not really doing anything with him. So maybe if we get a new perspective, we can start using characters in different ways, which I think would be good if the show's going to continue past the 4th season.
But I will say this, having Travis out and now having Maddie as the lead character, that's really a great change. because her character does have a lot more strength, and I love the idea of her being the lead character of the show and the franchise.
Wasn't she always the lead character, though? I mean, Travis.
So I tell my husband, if the apocalypse happens, you need to be a Madison, not a Rick. Your job is not to gather everybody up and take care of everybody. Your job is to keep your family alive. So you be a Madison, you don't be a Rick, and don't be a Travis either. But she's definitely been the one who's kept everybody from completely going to pieces.
I think your point is well made. I think they realized it too.
Yes.
What do you think Eugene is going to do in season 8? Is he gonna be a Darth Vader at the end, like do all this bad stuff and come back, or is he gonna just be a jerk the whole?
Ideally.
So hang on, I'm sorry. Just in case you guys didn't hear, she's asking about Eugene in season 8. So go ahead.
Ideally die. I have no use for Eugene. He is somebody you cannot trust. He has proven over and over again he is somebody you cannot trust. That's not somebody you let back into your community. You've got kids in that community. You can't have somebody who's going to turncoat at the first opportunity. You can't bring him back in.
But don't you think he needs a chance to redeem himself?
No! At least twice now, he has been deceptive to the point that people have died. So no, I think you've used up your chances, man. You get one chance in the
But
apocalypse.
Pastor Gabriel, he did some bad stuff.
Yeah, he had his chance and he came back and he hasn't done it again.
So first off, Eugene's got bad hair. So that alone means like, okay, I'm just saying, I don't know if you can come back from that. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't have been Eugene at the beginning lying about having the cure, but I'm not sure that I wouldn't be Eugene with Negan, because there is a series where Negan's the hero and he is actually doing what it takes to protect his people. And I think that's what makes it fascinating, because there are parts of that, despite his brutality, they're being fed. They have things. So I mean, that perspective. So
fireplaces.
So Eugene, he may have picked the wrong team, but I understand why he picked that team, because he wasn't very loyal to our little band of scrappy survivalists, but I don't think he can be redeemed. I think once you've made that choice, I don't think you can come back, just me personally.
But when Sasha died, she said that she still believes in Negan, and that might be the thing. Eugene, what's his name? Eugene, Mullet Man.
Yes.
So that might be.
I don't like when narratives reward disloyalty.
Okay, so possibly unpopular theory. Eugene plays the long game. He has the entire time. He lied. Yes, he lies. He lies, but he has some kind of reasoning behind what he does. And he lied for a very long time before he came into Rick's group. I wouldn't put it past him that this is all his way of deciding that this is what needs to happen in order for things to go the way that they should. That someone needs to be in Negan's camp and trusted in order for Rick to have somebody on the inside. Now, maybe not, but
I don't know, he seems like he's having a grand old time there with his...
He's the one who's supposed to showing that lying about his true colors, that's all. But that,
I mean, that was my theory too, that he's playing the long game, he's getting in there, And then there is that whole, while he was with Abraham, and she whose name escapes me.
Rosita?
Thank you. Rosita. I think he did kind of get drunk on power. And so that's what we are seeing at the end, where he was like, well, I'm in this position now, I'm trusted, just like he was with Rosita and Abraham. And so maybe he is playing the long game, but he's still kind of reverting back to that.
I agree with that. I think that he does, he likes being comfortable, he likes being important, like Elmo says, and so I don't see that at all.
Eugene has cool hair.
Okay. You want to speak up? I'm sorry.
I totally agree with the comment about Eugene playing the long game, but I think more importantly, he knows that he's a commodity, and everyone knows he's a coward, and so that's why Keegan doesn't really see him as a threat, and he wants to use that commodity to his advantage. But I think the other way around, Eugene will eventually find a weak spot because, as you saw with Keegan and Carl, he obviously has weak spots. You don't know really his background really much from the comic book, other than what they've shown. And I think that he's going to use those, that commodity and that advantage that he knows that he has. The weapons manufacturing, he's helping make bullets, advantage, and kind of
Good. Very nice.
So yeah, the fact that he is a commodity is what he's basically saying for those who couldn't hear. But yes, if he is the one who's creating the weapons, he's also the one who can sabotage them.
Just don't think people should give up on Eugene yet. That's all I'm saying.
No, good for you, Emma. You gotta have faith.
I'm in his corner. Well, on that note, and kind of talking about where things are going and really the longevity of both of these shows, what do you think the lifespan is for Walking Dead and Fear moving forward, especially being so many seasons in? It's 8 seasons into Walking Dead, and hopefully wanting to go out, on a high note like Breaking Bad did instead of,
Please let's cut it off at 10. We don't want to get into that. Now we have to have a musical episode because we're in season 12 and we've used every other.
Supernatural's great. That's all I'm saying.
Come on.
I would like to see a resolution to this story sometime that is not another 10 years from now. I feel like we've all invested a lot of time in these characters in this world, and of course we don't want to say goodbye to them, but at the same time, we want them to win. We want there to be some kind of win condition, and if you keep pushing that goalpost farther back and farther back, I just think it gets really frustrating for the viewers because you want your guys to turn out okay. You want them to either find the cure or find the place they can go where they'll really be safe or rebuild a community that's going to last. And I don't think that you can keep them losing time after time indefinitely. I do think there's a shelf life on that. So I would say 10 seasons is probably a good, nice round number. Gives us plenty of time to resolve things and still find a workable solution to get out of this mess.
I like how you're thinking, though I believe AMC is going to want to push the money making, as much as they can. So I'm going to go a dozen. I think that it's going to be an even 12 years. And that's, we'll get this season is the season of war. And then we'll kind of wrap some other things, and then we'll shoot for an end. Because I think they're going to want to know in advance there's an end coming so they can promote it and then also plan to that ending.
Yeah, I think that they should give an end date. I personally lean more towards the 10 seasons because, again, go out on a higher note than letting this go out until the bitter end. Also, we've also seen in recent years the way that they write the show is to work around the fact that the main cast wants more and more breaks. And it's going to get to a point where even they say, I've been doing this for how long? So I think you got to balance those out. But definitely I think that they should set an end date because that will, if nothing else, revitalize interest in the fact, ooh, hey, we're driving towards the end now versus, oh, that show is still on?
I'd like to see it go long enough for The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead to intersect. Just even if it's just a couple of characters, I'd like, Nick and his buddies to have made it across the country and they arrive at the brave new world that Rick and company have built. I'd love there to be enough time in each season to get a little bit of intersection, even though I know the Fear the Walking Dead storyline is set much earlier.
So we have 2 10s and a 12. Emma, what's your choice?
Well, I love the convention stuff, so I'm going to say 12. But I do think if it comes down to it being a question in quality of storyline and something that organically feels like it should happen earlier, then it should be less seasons. Don't compromise the story. But on that note, what about Fear? How many more seasons do you see Fear having, or should Fear have?
top it out at 5. Nice, solid 5.
Well, again, if they revitalize things with the new writers, who knows? But I actually really like that idea of kind of AMC saying, okay, the final seasons of each show is going to be at the same rough time, and kind of really dig that idea of the characters on Fear that survive making it to the end, and that being the wrap-up of the franchise on TV.
How about you guys? Any thoughts on how many more seasons you would like to see of these shows? Or what you would like to see happen at the end of these shows?
Who do you want to have die?
So, I'm with you. I think it needs to be a good story. I don't think we need to say, oh, it's going to be 10, 12, 15, whatever. But again, I think there is the money-making aspect that the studio can want to get a little push there. But it should be a good story.
Absolutely.
How does it end, right? Does it end with the children of Rick and Michonne starting the brave new world? Maybe that's a good time to go out.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it should be a good story. And our guys got to do it, right?
Absolutely.
It's going to be a lot of angry fans if he doesn't. A lot of times we see the fandoms of Game of Thrones and Walking Dead compared because there are so many crossovers and fans there. We have a number of spin-off series that are coming from Game of Thrones. At the end of Walking Dead, do you think there is room for a spin-off of maybe a certain character that makes it to the end, whether it's Fear or from Walking Dead, and we kind of follow their life and maybe even a different tonality of show?
I think it depends on whether or not they find a cure. If you find a cure, is there enough story to be told in a rebuilding society, but we don't have to worry about zombies anymore, to be a worthwhile narrative, like more than just maybe like a one-run miniseries? And if it's just, we didn't find a cure, but they have a happy community, how many new stories are there to tell about, well, and then we're going to fight these bad guys here, and these bad guys here, and these zombies here? Like, I mean, how many times can you retell those stories in this same setting?
Yeah, I didn't think that, Better Call Saul was going to be as good as it is, so, I'm not in this business, so I can't tell. I don't see how you could spin off, after things happen. But, if you have the right writers and you have a good premise, I think it could work.
Okay, so we get to do whatever we want on this, right? Okay. Okay, we've already seen what happened essentially on both coasts, right? And one of the strengths, in my opinion, of Fear the Walking Dead was when they delved into a different culture's response to the outbreak. What I would love to see is a show that, even if it's an event series or something like that, an anthology series, show what happened in other parts of the world. How did they handle this? Like, and from a cultural perspective, there's places in the world that it could have gone much better, or it could have gone horrifically wrong. Let's see what happens in the middle of Tokyo. There's a lot of different other places that we could go that show a completely different perspective on how this happened. And I think that would be really an interesting way for them to go, because that could just expand it into all kinds of different new places.
For the audience, if there was one cast member that you would want to continue to follow, or one character that you'd want to continue to follow even after this series wraps, who would you be most interested in following the journey of?
Daryl
and Carol? Jerry will be here at 7 o'clock tomorrow for a panel, so if you guys want to see him.
We could always do a Carol cooking show for the Food Network. Really good cookies. Do you like cookies?
I want to follow Judith. Like, the life of somebody who has never known anything other than this. Like, that would be fascinating.
Yeah, I'd like to see a show like maybe 25, 30 years in the future of how everybody rebuilt. And Judith is now maybe in her 50s, talking to all the younger people, doing flashbacks, going back, and seeing what happens 25 years after they survive. What's that storyline? I didn't know it'd be a great storyline. We do flashbacks, the whole apocalypse happened. You can reinvent that 100 million different ways, but no one's really done anything in the future. What's the future like?
And then Clark's can land, and we have the 100, and that's our spinoff right there, right? Like the 100th landed on the Walking Dead world.
Do you have a question?
No, she said it.
Okay, cool. How do you think this series has really changed the landscape of television? I mean, this has been, the #1 show on cable. How has this really changed television as we know it today?
Well, I think it's really been some of the most graphically violent television that I've seen that's not on one of like the HBO, Showtime kind of. So I think it really did a lot to kind of push the envelope of how much can you show on TV, what is appropriate for non high-end cable channels. But also I think that the type of storytelling, that really taking the ensemble cast like that, and I mean having entire episodes where you don't see maybe who you typically think is the more important characters, and I've seen more shows doing that now. So I mean I think that's a really positive impact that it's had on storytelling.
So we're going to be covering this a little bit more. Let me tease at 11:30 on Monday in this very room, the influence of The Walking Dead on current culture. So if you're interested in a greater in-depth discussion of this, check us out. In a lot of ways, I don't know that it has. There's at times where I think AMC is really happy with the money it's making and happy with the ratings, but I had another podcaster talk about it. This isn't the show they kind of talk about as their marquee show, as far as pushing to get Emmys or awards, and this is a really well done show, and I think by calling it a horror show, you're selling it short. So I hope that what it's done to influence is that, any genre can work if you have great writing, and good talent, both in front of and behind the camera. So I hope that's its influence that it's done.
I think earlier you mentioned Walking Dead and Game of Thrones in the same, sentence, and I think that's the importance here. It may, in isolation, not have changed very much, as you were just saying, but if you think back 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of genre TV, even with the explosion of cable networks out there. There was still a relatively small amount, and they got a lot of attention from fans like us for that reason. Look at the television landscape now. What is the primary type of show that they're putting out there? It's this kind of television show. And I think that Walking Dead, like Game of Thrones and a few of these other shows that came out, back right around the same time, were a huge influence on some of these network executives that said, here is a way that you can make this genre work and have the eyeballs on the screens. And do we all remember when The Walking Dead's budget got slashed because Mad Men needed another season? Think that would happen now?
No, it wouldn't.
Well, I think it also completely revitalized the zombie genre. I think you have a renaissance of zombie media that, because of The Walking Dead, has led to people, well, what other types of zombie shows can we have? Like, I don't know that iZombie would have made it as a TV show if you didn't already have the more serious, dramatic, traditional zombie story already airing. I think, what can I do with zombies that's different? Those are now stories that people can tell and people can actually make money putting on TV, and I don't think that you could have had that without The Walking Dead.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that's the beauty of iZombie and The Walking Dead are as different as you can imagine, and they're both zombie shows, and it's just amazing that I wouldn't have thought you could do something that subtle in your palette, but they have been able to do. And once again, I think it's back to, a great creative team and a wonderful cast making something work.
Well, just to jump on one last thing, though, is that, again, we've said it a couple times here, it's because it's not a show about zombies. It's a show about people.
Yes.
And that's the key, I think.
Absolutely.
Do you have any audience questions? Yes.
Assuming you don't read the source material, if you do, and if you don't count Dawn, how do you feel about a female villain in the future?
I love female villains, and I would like to see female villains that don't rely on, well, she was horrifically abused by somebody, something tragic happened to her. Like, women can be evil just as much as men, and they don't have to have a tragic backstory. Sometimes they're just assholes. And so I am totally on board with a complex, well-developed female villain who is not acting out their villainy as a result of something terrible that was done to her.
Yep. I echo all that. I would like them to be, I'd like the creative team to come up with something, a different twist than just an evil leader trying to, destroy our little band of misfits. It would be interesting to have a complex character, and everyone loved the governor, and we love Negan, and they're great villains, but I think it would be kind of nice, and by having a female lead in that role and try to come up with a different of why she's doing this could be very, very cool. Maybe they're, it's a leader of a group coming into, kind of think if Rick came into that town and kind of took over. What if that happened with a female lead, and she had strong, and she's smart, and she has a good idea, and then you have that political battle back and forth. Might make for an interesting story.
Maybe Madison can be the villain.
I was about to go there.
Yeah.
Because really what I'd like to get them to go away from is the idea of them as villains. These are people who are choosing to survive in the way that they understand best. That was supposed to be the selling point for Negan, right? Or even the governor, that they're just doing things that's as they see best, and you could even, I think Kirkman was the one that said that you could have followed a series that was Negan's story and it would have been effectively just as compelling as Rick's story, and you might even have agreed with the moves that he made. So, that being the case, we already have a female leader in Madison, and what choices will she have to make?
Right.
Exactly. What choices will she make that if it were someone that Rick was up against, we'd see them as a villain.
Yeah.
But because she's the main character, we're sympathetic.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Yes, me.
What did you guys think about the Tara Oceanside episode? It was very polarizing.
It was very polarizing.
Yeah, what do you guys think about that one?
I wanted to see a lot more of that community. I thought that was really interesting. I think that you could, if you wanted to expand the world, like I would watch a whole, maybe not a full spin-off series, but I'd watch like a one-run mini-series about that town and their culture and the way that they've stayed alive and how they run things. I thought it was a really different type of community than the other ones that we've encountered.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, there might be your female antagonist, if you get someone from there and do that. I think it's one of the things that makes this show interesting is the hard choices you have to make, given the circumstances of where we're at, and that's why the show isn't about zombies, it's about people. What do you do? I mean, going back to if you've betrayed us, you can't forgive them. What do you do? So I think that was a really interesting, the idea of once you've found us, you either become part of us or we kill you, because we need to keep this secret to protect our people, and so I thought it was a great episode.
And comparatively, look how many of their children they've managed to keep alive compared to every other community that you've seen. So they're doing something that works. Like, they still have kids. They don't have, like, the one or two kids because they're Rick's kids. Like, they get a lot of children in their community, which speaks, I think, very well to their particular method of survivalism working long term.
So I'm going to spin my answer into a kind of different topic because I agree with what they have to say. I think that the concept of the Oceanside community was really strong. What I think took away from it was that it was one of these extended episodes that was unnecessarily extended, and it was so long that I think that that's what drew people into feeling like, why are we spending so much time on this? I feel like they extend the episodes a little too much now. And I think that it robs the urgency from the situation. And while it's great that we got to see that particular community, I think that they need to edit a little bit more. They really need to get to the core a little bit. And that may be another one of those unpopular opinions.
I like getting to spend more time with Tara. I feel like she earned it, especially since they have offed 2 of her girlfriends now. So maybe giving her a little bit of more narrative time outside of those plots and letting her do a little more was nice for me to see. I enjoyed that.
I agree with you with the extended episodes. I don't like it. It pushes comic book men to like 12:30.
Exactly! Come on!
I completely understand your point.
Okay, so
Well played, sir.
is The Walking Dead still doing Story Sync? Because Fear the Walking Dead dropped their stories. Anybody else do Story Sync when they watch?
I don't.
Oh, I love Story Sync. I love the multimedia experience. And Fear the Walking Dead did not re-up the Story Sync this season, and I was heartbroken because I got my tablet and I had the TV on. I was ready to go to answer my questions, and it wasn't there, and they didn't do it. So, but the multimedia experience that AMC has given us has been really cool to me because you get the radio clips, and they had all about the military project and Fear the Walking Dead, like the documents you could look at with the redacted stuff, and that's so cool to me because I'm such a nerd, y'all. I am such a nerd. Like I eat that stuff up. Like, oh, you're going to give me a link to an entire file of government documents that tells you how the government's plan to implement Project Cobalt is? Like, yeah, I am there for that. And then they didn't give it to me this season, and I was mad.
I think the other thing with the Tara episode was, unfortunately, when it came in the season. There was that big episode of the premiere, and then it took so long to get back to those characters, and that episode just happened to be, it's the first extended episode since the premiere, and everyone's anticipating, this is going to be one about the main, it's a standalone, and I think that's where some of the negativity came from, too.
The actress had also just had a baby, and I think they were trying to sort of reintegrate Tara into the story after having had her be largely absent for stuff because of the baby having. So I think that was sort of a practical issue because you couldn't have that story spread out over more episodes because she had a brand new baby.
Speaking of practical issues, why is it that nobody ever addresses a woman's menstrual cycle? I've been trying to figure out.
These women don't even grow armpit hair. Of course they don't have periods.
But that is the most impractical thing about these shows, these apocalyptic shows, is that they never address that. I know in my little survival kit, I have some tampons and shit in there.
Yeah, you've got the reusable cups because you know that you won't have to worry about replacing those.
But when they go on runs, they're looking for everything under the sun. I'm like, you're in a fucking pharmacy, you can't pick that up.
Because they're sending the guys.
Everybody's had electrolysis and endometrial ablation in this world. Nobody has periods, nobody grows body hair.
I'd like somebody to give a nod to that. Somebody to be like...
Or it could be that they're all starving so much that they have now dropped their body fat below the ceiling where they're not having them anymore.
But it wouldn't be everybody going...
That's true. That's because it's mostly men writing it and they don't think about that. They're like, we should write in a practical thing like, while you're there, please buy me some tampons.
Well, what they would have to do is to survive in that situation, some skill of some sort.
It's funny that you guys...
Since zombies are drawn to blood.
Yeah.
Good point.
Very good point.
That is a good point. There was a scene with Andrea and the governor where they did they showed her foot and her toenails were painted. And that really bothered me. I was like, how'd you have time? Okay. All right, I guess you got it.
Before the apocalypse, and it just lasted that long.
It's a gel.
I could buy that maybe Rosita has had electrolysis and does not grow armpit hair. She strikes me as a character who perhaps may have done that. But you can't tell me across the board that all of these women don't grow any body hair at all.
That's the same reason Jack Bauer never took a leak anywhere. It's just, it is TV. It is. I totally get it, and I think it would be an interesting discussion. But it's one of those hand waves that we have that you kind of,
Like imagine being the person who comes back from the run and you've brought the last box of tampons in creation. Like you would be a god in that village. There would be fights over who gets to have that box.
And they wouldn't even need to spend that much time on it, but it's just like nobody ever mentions it. Like in a part of survival, what do you do? You know, like somebody they could have made it a 5-minute thing. Yeah. Or 15-minute thing.
And you could have I found a cache of deodorant, baby powder, some fresh socks, and some toilet paper. Yes! And along with female products, yes, I agree. That's the deleted scenes we'll see on the DVD.
I agree. It smacks of a male exec network note to take it out, because it would be one of the things that they naturally would have to address, especially with larger populations. So.
Go ahead.
Well, two things actually. One, why does Maggie not look pregnant? She's pregnant.
Not that much time has passed. They just make it seem like it lasts forever.
And secondly, they are in Georgia, correct? Why haven't we?
No, they're now in Alexandria, Virginia.
Okay, still, doesn't it get cold? Why hasn't there been any snow? It's been like the same season. If you think about it, if this long time has passed, shouldn't there have been a change of season?
Well, Judith is only 18 months old, so only 2.5 years have passed.
But no, what I'm saying is, since they live in an area where there's 4 seasons, it's the same. I live in Florida. I live in Orlando, so it's hot all year round except for 1 month. But where they are, it's there should have been a change. You never see them in parkas, and you never see them in jackets.
Because the actors would die. Because they're filming it in Georgia in the summertime.
Well, I don't know. I'm just thinking, if they're outside,
yeah.
You know what I mean? There should have been a change, unless the apocalypse did something to the see the weather or signs. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, I do.
Oh, yeah.
I understand totally.
It was one thing when they were in Georgia the whole time, but now that they're up in Virginia, there should be at least 2 seasons.
On a realistic thing, I totally get it. They would die. I know. They'd be on the heat, but I don't know. Just to make it a little more realistic.
Okay.
Actually, a really good point, because imagine how the changes in the temperature outside would change the activities of birds, of the threat of the zombies themselves. In the summer,
winter would
worse
be the
than
best
winter.
time in a zombie apocalypse. They'd be just frozen meat sticks.
Yeah.
I read an interview where they addressed that. It's too expensive to fake winter. That's exactly why they don't do any winter scenes.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure they hand wave it somehow, by time jumps and such. But good point. Very nice.
Cool. Well, we're almost out of time, and I had a little video for you guys, but I managed to get myself locked out of the computer. So you guys may have to come to the panel tomorrow at 7 o'clock to see that. I'm locked out. Unless someone knows the password to this computer.
I don't know the password. I'll have to ask Shannon.
All right. Well, cool. So teaser for tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, the same room. We have the cast and crew panel, and it's going to be really awesome. And we're going to have a lot of really cool videos, including the one I could have shown. Well, cool. Thank you guys so much for coming. Do you guys each want to kind of say where you guys can be found on social media and all that fun jazz?
You can pretty much find me everywhere on every platform as Raving Liberal, either raving_liberal or Raving Liberal, all one word. And I mean every social platform. If you put that in, you're going to find me. Twitter, Tumblr, AO3, you're going to find me everywhere. And speaking of AO3, if you guys are fanfiction writers or readers, I have these pins here that I'm giving away for free if you'd like to put your username on them so people can find you.
I am at Jesse Jackson DFW. If you follow me, every once in a while you will see some people think I'm the Reverend Jackson and show ugly tweets to me. I have cards up here for both my podcasts, so if you want to see, I do a Doctor Who podcast and the Bruce Springsteen podcast, as I said. Facebook, Jesse Jackson in Louisville, Texas. Would love for you guys to reach out to me and check out some of my work.
On Facebook and Twitter, just look up Critical Myth and you'll find me. Also, the written reviews for The Walking Dead and sometimes Fear the Walking Dead are on vognetwork.com. That's vognetwork.com.
And you can find me on basically every social platform at Emma Loggins. And on fanbolt.com, and a weekly podcast called The Atlas, which we do on all things nerd culture with a strong focus on Atlanta. So thank you guys for joining us.